From the moment really that Chavez took power, the Chavez government took power in 1999, there was immediate opposition to this new government. Because what Chavez was essentially doing was completely overturning an entire regime.
Chavez began to see we need to eradicate this poverty in our country, and the way to do it is by gaining control of our oil industry and making sure those profits are going back into our country.
The oil industry is the purse strings of the country, and Chavez realized that until he gained control of the purse strings, any efforts at real social reform that requires funding would find challenges. And now he was seeking to gain control of that oil industry.
Chavez finally, took a very direct step in terms of transforming the state-owned oil company, PDVSA, and fired the entire board of directors.
He actually comes on TV and he's wearing a referee's jersey from a football match. And he's got a whistle and he calls out the name of director so-and-so and blows the whistle and says, "Get out of here, you're fired," right? So people are pretty angry. And there are marches going on, huge, huge marches.
By seeking greater control of the national oil company, PDVSA, Chavez was taking on Venezuela's most prized and powerful asset. The fight for PDVSA spilled out onto the streets, becoming symbolic of the struggle between two Venezuelas. One left behind by an oil-fueled modernity, the other looking to keep its place and its control within it. Caracas was a tinderbox of competing ideals, battling for the very idea of Venezuela.
Venezuela was in a huge turmoil. Everyday demonstrations in the streets. Going to Miraflores, the presidential palace.
There was an opposition rally that was moving in hundreds of thousands towards the palace in order to ask Chavez to resign. But the palace was surrounded by backers of Hugo Chavez that were going to resist this rally. People that were on buildings shooting. We don't know who they were. Several civilians fell dead of both sides.
Chavez called the army to send the tanks into the street to stop the people. And the army said, "Sorry, this is a political problem. We are not sending the tanks to the street to stop the people."
That was the coup. That was really when the moment the coup happened was when his minister said, "I can't go out."
The army had been scarred by their handling of the Caracas unrest in 1989. But its high rank had been conspiring with elements of the elite establishment deposed by Chavez, and together they plotted his downfall.
We started getting reports in the fall of 2001 that, this guy, that guy, the other guy are planning a coup. It becomes like background noise. If we're hearing this, everybody in Venezuela is hearing it as well.
Charles Shapiro had taken his seat as the U.S. ambassador to Venezuela just 3 weeks before the coup against President Chavez, a coup that was far from secret.
So the first weekend I'm there, I meet with this delegation from the trade union organization. And finally at the end, I said, what I hear you saying is the following, is that there's a coup underway that's going to take place, and you think you're being left out of it, and you want to be in on the coup. And they went, yeah. Imagine that. I said, yes.
The executives of PDVSA were in the coup. The church was in the coup. The Cardinal of Caracas was in the coup. The entrepreneurs, the president of Fedecamaras was in the coup.
And I told people repeatedly, I said, look, if it looks like a coup and it sounds like a coup, it's a coup. We're opposed to any extrajudicial change of government, and if you don't like this government, that's certainly your business, but vote it out of office.
And so it became clear that they were planning something, and the US ambassador who was in Venezuela at the time was openly collaborating with the opposition.
the US government did not organize, plan, implement, authorize a coup, okay? And if I had, I'm not organized enough to have organized a coup in 3 weeks.
Chavez was forced out by this coalition of these opposition groups allied with these dissenting military, high-ranking military officers who had forcefully gone in and taken him against his will.
Chavez calls Fidel Castro. Supposedly, he told Castro that he was considering committing suicide. That it is Castro who talks him down, says, don't do that. You'll live to fight another day, don't do that, turn yourself into the military, and that's what he does.
Chavez had been ousted, taken into custody, and flown to an offshore military base.
Meanwhile, Pedro Carmona, the president of Fedecamaras, the Federation of Chambers of Commerce, says that he's going to be the leader of the country.
He practically emerges as a dictator. He abolishes the rule of law in Venezuela.
They literally decreed the dissolution of all of Venezuela's democratic institutions, including the Constitution that had just been approved and written by over 80% of the country.
In the National Assembly, they have this swearing-in ceremony where Carmona swears himself in as president of the country. Like Napoleon, right? I mean, under natural law, I declare myself to be president of the country, right? I mean, it's just astounding.
What was amazing to me was that a day hadn't even passed. I mean, it was just a matter of hours, and it was already endorsed by the US government, who had their spokespeople coming out of State Department and the White House saying, Chavez has resigned and we support the transitional government in Venezuela.
The press spokesperson in Washington indicated that Chavez had brought the coup on himself. This is at a time in which Latin America has been trying to avoid coups and had trying to erase the legacy of the 1980s and 1990s, where there had been a series of military coups in Latin America.
There was an assumption that Chavez wasn't coming back. We had to deal with Carmona as the de facto government, get Carmona to get the country back in the democratic path as quickly as possible, and ensure that he doesn't kill Chavez. So meanwhile, Chavez on La Orchila, which is a military base. But what he does is he writes out a note and he puts it in the trash can that says, I'm still the president, I never resign.
People began pouring into the streets, and then, pieces began to fall into place with military officers that were loyal to Chavez that saw, what was happening was wrong, that there were people, millions, who were reclaiming, their rights. They voted for this president. What's going on?
When this huge pro-Chavez demonstration comes and essentially drives Carmona and his government out of the presidential palace, the military sends a helicopter to pick up Chavez. Chavez gets back to the presidential palace.
It's something like a movie, a Hollywood movie. He comes back in a helicopter in the night, and the people are waiting for him. And he says, oh, here I am, go to sleep, I'm here, I'm president again.
Within 48 hours of being overthrown, Hugo Chavez was back in power